I'm about to tape this ceiling, and there is actually an order that I tape the seams. My goal is to tape this long beveled edge seam, which is about 20 feet long, but I have all these intersecting butted seams, so I want to put tape on the butted seams first, then I'm going to handle the long beveled seam, and then I'm going to do my inside corners. For these butted seams and these bevel seams, I'm going to be using the fiberglass matte tape, and I'm embedding it in an all-purpose heavyweight compound. I'm trying not to put too much compound on, just enough so I don't have any dry spots. It's probably 1/8 of an inch thick or a little less. So now I'm just going to place the fiberglass matte tape over the center of that seam. And I'm not really pressing it in, it's just kind of lightly in place. So I'm going to press it in a minute with my taping knife. Now I just embed the tape with my taping knife. I start in the middle and work towards each end. You can see the compound, excess compound, coming out. The tape is embedded nice and tight right into the compound. That's what you want to look for. Now that I have tape embedded on the butted seams, I'm ready to handle this long beveled edge seam. I'm just going to work my way the entire length, applying a nice layer of compound. Now as I apply the fiberglass matte tape to the seam, I'm going to center as I pull it along, but I'm trying to keep it pulled tight so I don't get any wrinkles. See what I mean by pulling it tight? I've got one hand holding the tape in place, and before I place the other edge, I'm pulling it nice and taut. Now, just how I did when I embedded the tape on the butted seams, I'm starting roughly center and I'm working towards each end. All I'm doing here is trying to embed the tape nice and tight into the compound. I'm using a 6-inch taping knife, and instead of using a hawk, I'm using just a wide trowel. A lot of people use a hawk for this, but I find that the wide trowel works just as well for me. My goal here is to embed it nice and tight. Remember, this is a beveled edge seam, so if you want to just check to see if you got it tight enough, you can actually take the edge of your trowel and hold it up against that ceiling, right over the seam. If I leave a crease in the tape, I've left too much compound behind it. I've actually created a bump. But if I still see daylight coming through it, I've done a perfect job embedding that tape. That's your goal. Now that I have these seams taped, I'm going to start putting a coat of joint compound over the screws. And just like when we embed the tape on these seams, I like to use the heavyweight all-purpose compound. So when you coat screws, you go in one direction and then you pull back in the opposite direction. So in other words, this way and then back the other way. The reason for that is if I were to only go in one direction, applying and removing, sometimes I will get a little crescent-shaped hollow spot where the joint compound isn't. I'm actually going to try to create that right here by going in one direction, applying the compound, and then the same direction removing it. There's a perfect example. I wasn't able to properly fill them because I didn't remove the compound by going the opposite way. It's interesting, you'll notice that when I put a coat of joint compound over screws, I'm actually doing the entire strip of screws at once. That way I only have applying the mud and removing the mud, basically 2 movements. I see a lot of people doing this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which is a lot longer to do compared to 1, 2. Also, coating them in a strip makes it easier to sand later because I just gonna need to run my sander down each edge and I'm done. I'm ready to start taping the inside corners. All the seams that intersect these inside corners already have a coated tape on them. I'm going to switch to a paper tape for my inside corners because the fiberglass matte tape is not real user-friendly when you're hand taping inside corners. I'm going to apply a layer of joint compound to the top edge and then come back through and apply a layer to the bottom edge of this inside corner, about the same thickness as I did on my seams. You can see that I have a nice even amount of joint compound on each edge, and I don't have any big chunks, and I'm trying not to have any dry spots. As I glanced over here, I saw a spot that was a little dry, so I just put a little compound on there. Now I'm just going to fold the paper tape into that corner. It has a crease, so it just easily folds along that crease. And as I'm pulling it along the corner, creasing it with my left hand, I'm placing it with my right. I'm keeping it pulled tight, but I'm not pushing it in the entire length with my fingers, just enough to hold it in place. Keeping it pulled nice and tight to eliminate any potential wrinkles. Now I'm going to embed it nice and tight using my 6-inch taping knife. I'm going to start approximately in the middle and just pull it towards each edge. You can see all the compound that I'm pulling off of that. And that's really all you have to do. Unless I were to see a wrinkle or something, I don't even need to go over that area again. One little thing you can do to test to make sure that you've got enough compound behind it as well as removed enough compound. If I tap on it with my finger and I'm not leaving an indentation, that means that I haven't left an excess amount of compound. If I were to leave little dimples with my finger, then I've got too much compound behind it. But now if you're worried that you haven't left enough, you can always just peel it back to check. And you can see that I have plenty of compound behind that tape. That's pretty much all I'm going to do on the stilts. Now I'm going to get off the stilts, tape all the seams, and then finish up with the inside corner that butts up against the ceiling.